Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, January 18th. We're starting particularly late today because A, I woke up late, but then I woke up late to also be told that my internet was out, so I sat down and started to do a Lego set instead, since that is my go-to action of being immature and killing time at the same time. Uh, I guess I could have tried to pre-record some footage, but then that would have exhausted me a little bit. I finished for the accountability section. I finished all of Fear 2, and the DLC Reborn was actually fairly short, so there was not a lot of content there in the first place. It only took maybe 2, maybe 3 hours to do Fear the DLC called Reborn, which doesn't really change too much in the story, and I don't know if I particularly covered the ending of Fear 2, but yeah, it's an immature story told by immature people, and in this new 2021 era of hearing a lot of like immature actions, and I'll try not to get too SJW here. Uh, but like we've heard of a lot of immature actions that while my knee-jerk reaction may have been to defend, at the end of the day do feel like they are over the line, that have been taken by a lot of game developer managers and people like that. And that Fear 2 definitely feels like it was made by a group of gamer bros that didn't have a female in the room for a second of any of the story pitch, nor did they even think things through. So you end up, when you have something like that, with a game that literally ends, Fear 2 literally ends, and this is only a slight spoiler, with the main character being raped by a ghost to so the ghost can be impregnated by him. And yeah, that's a immature story that is not told at all with the level of care and caution that one would need to tell a story like that and and do it well, in my book. So yeah, I finished Fear 2, and now I'm playing The Walking Dead, the final series, um, which, or Walking Dead, the final season, which all the save files have been lost on that from playing the previous game, so all my decisions were just totally lost. I don't know if that's 100% because Telltale went out of business, because you can still log into telltale.com, but they aren't pulling any save files, weren't able to pull any save files at all from that. Let's go back and see what we actually needed to play. I looked at the missions and didn't read them. Let's see. Forestcraft. Guess we have to play Forestcraft. I've been getting a few tickets, so now I have like 2 entry tickets right now, which that's fine, but that doesn't inherently mean I need to use those tickets anytime soon. I could sit on them forever, particularly if I'm not having any level of real success with these arena runs, which at the moment, Grand Prix rotation, I am not really having much success with these arena runs. Yeah. Looking at The Walking Dead, the final season, and thinking about how a potential Indiana Jones game might take some cues from that, there's actually very little you could take from that. I, I think you might just be better doing a straight, flat 2D point and click adventure game. And I just won't really even consider that they could make a non point and click adventure game that's an Indiana Jones game, and it would potentially satisfy me. Like, I just don't think you're gonna have that experience if the Indiana Jones games that Microgun Games makes, which more than likely this is the case, is just them trying to do more Wolfenstein reboot with Indiana Jones, I will pretty much immediately be uninterested in that. And yeah, ignoring Telltale, ignoring Indiana Jones, The Walking Dead final season has you playing as Clementine, who I couldn't even remember her name, it had been so long. And you're taking care of the baby AJ, who is now like maybe 10 years old, so about the same age, if not the same age as Clementine was at the beginning of the series. And I don't know if there's really much more that you can say. Like, it feels very much like they are just doing more of the same as far as bringing back the old characters of Clementine and AJ, and maybe they'll bring back some other characters too, but none of them will really matter. They give you decisions, and none of those really matter. They give you these action sequences. The one thing that Walking Dead, the final season, has struck me as odd is that the action sequences are considerably more difficult, or at least they feel more difficult, because I'm failing almost every action sequence at least once, and then at that point I assume there is a adaptive difficulty kicking in and the game is letting me win on the second attempt. I'm still very much just playing the Walking Dead game like I have been, making Clementine manipulate people on a near sociopathic level to get whatever survivalist obsessed goal I have, which at this point it is still mostly to keep Clementine alive, and then secondarily to keep AJ alive. Swinging between trying to convince people with words and often then convincing them with manipulation and force. But they really aren't doing anything different. You're in a boarding school for like juvenile delinquents in the first episode, of which there's only 4, not even 5 this time, and it's just a bunch of kids and teenagers, which it just feels a lot like the motel sequence in the first season being copied. One of the thoughts I certainly had would have been, it would have been interesting if there was a dream sequence, which there's only been one dream sequence for a brief moment in the entire series before this, but had there been interconnected dream sequences where Clementine was dreaming of what her life would have been like had the zombie apocalypse not been, had she been at a school like the boarding school, but instead of it being for delinquent use, it actually being a fancy, nice school, and then you could animate her with in like a school uniform, and she could be friends with lots of people that she's met along the way. And in a funny way, for zombie stories in any format or genre, I don't think anybody has done the thing that feels extremely cliche, but I don't think anybody's actually done it where it was just all a dream. Of course, storytelling and having everything be a dream is pretty cliche in general, but you might try it, particularly when you're Telltale Games and you're about to be bankrupt. They went bankrupt 2 episodes into this, and then Skybound Games had to finish the last 2 episodes. So, yeah, I don't expect the story is going to end anywhere. It's just going to be more misery. And that'll probably be it. And that'll pretty much be all except for the Batman games. And I guess if Skybound does manage to make a Wolf Among Us 2, or I don't even know if it was Skybound that was going to make the Wolf Among Us 2, or if it was going to be actually
For the town's prosperity.
let's see. Let's go ahead and rush this.
No right to tread here.
For the town's prosperity.
Please, no more.
And then
This
this.
here ranch will never know thirst.
Home sweet home.
Then in return. Okay, that went well. So yeah, I just am thoroughly unimpressed with the final season of The Walking Dead. And it puts you in a weird position where really the only way I could suggest playing The Walking Dead, like when I started covering it on my channel, I would have suggested everybody play it, particularly at least the first season. But the second season, the third season, the spin-off games, which really makes it closer to five or six games, have just lowered the enthusiasm, and there's just been enough of a delay that the best case scenario I could suggest for people would be to play it all in one short burst in less than, I would say, 6 months. And then there's a ton of jump cuts in the Telltale games, so they oddly, normally you wouldn't suggest this in a game, or I wouldn't definitely, but I think for this one instance they probably should just pop up a box saying, hey, do you want to keep on playing at this point, or do you want to take a break? Because it really is more of a game that I think would be better suited on something like a cell phone or a tablet instead, and being done on short commutes where you do one scene, like even shorter than like 30-minute episodes. Man, if I had just destroyed that one amulet, I would have actually probably won there, but I didn't, so I didn't. I will want to run through the news fairly quickly today. Yeah. But yeah. I half want the Telltale The Walking Dead game to have them go in a route that none of the other Walking Dead series have gone, and I don't think the Walking Dead creator would have let them do this, but since the TV series, I think the main TV series of The Walking Dead pretty much just ended, and the comic book pretty much just ended when the main character's story ended. It would be nice if the Telltale game actually ended with a cure. It also would be an interesting twist if Clementine got called out for all of her actions throughout the entire series. It also would be kind of meta and cool if the game called out Clementine and the player as saying, as telling her, like, no, you have not been really speaking your true feelings this whole time. So the player character has been picking for you, or you say it a different way and phrase it and go, no, Clementine, you haven't been speaking the truth the whole time. You've been lying and manipulating to survive throughout all of the games. Because, yeah, you don't have, or I particularly don't have this role-playing connection to the Telltale games where I feel like I am 100% certain I really am representing the thoughts and feelings of Clementine more than I'm just telling her what to think and what to say. And then when you pick something to say, it's often an abbreviated answer that often doesn't mean the thing you want it to mean. And also several times I've had options where I just don't like I don't like the options at all, and I'm not being given the thing I actually would want to say.
It might be dry, but
And
it's
when you
cold.
combine that with the fact that Telltale Games really just have scripted QuickTime events for action, it is significantly less polished than a game like Fallout or Skyrim or yeah. At least when you look at Skyrim, there's crafting and grinding and going through dungeons and fighting monsters that are not just QuickTime events, and all of that may be fairly buggy, but at least it exists. Where the Telltale engine can't even really handle itself. Ridiculously, it's the final season of The Walking Dead is a game that came out or copyrighted 2018, and 3 years later in 2021 it just does not by default run on Windows 10. You have to put it in Windows 8 compatibility mode, which is just completely ridiculous. But anyways, that's all I've really been doing. I have yet to fully test the script that I was working on to determine if somebody's plugged in a USB drive or changed the hardware on a computer. But I did find out that there is a third program besides LSPCI and LSUSB. There's one called BLKID. This gives you the block identification number for mounted devices. So that opens up the possibility to detect if somebody put in a floppy disk drive, if you happen to have a floppy disk drive or a CD-ROM. Calling that program is fairly slow, and calling all these programs is potentially a bad idea to do every 10 seconds, which is what I have it set on. But at the end of the day, I think that's the only way that's going to work.
You have no right to tread here.
So, yeah. I made a small tweak there. But that script literally just runs different programs and then compares the output, so it's fairly easy to change. I just added one more variable to an array at the very top of the code, and that's, I think, pretty much all I did. I think I went on into the rsyslog settings of my server, and I'm trying to tell it to not put inside the syslog file all notices and informational notices, trying to pare that down to just warnings and errors and emergency notices. Because at the moment, the way I have it set up, when the old logs are rotated out, they are getting emailed and encrypted into encrypted and emailed, and that means they have to be broken up if they're long files. And in the case of syslog on Linux at the moment, it is taking it like 75 to 100 emails to break the whole file up, and that's too much. Like, some of them get broken up into 10 or 20 emails, and that's fine. I'm hoping if I rewrite the encryption file program and get away from Python, that may allocate more RAM, which may allow me to not have to break up the files at all. Like, in theory, it would be very nice for it to all be one email always, and not really have to compromise there. Okay. Well, let's do, if I do this, I can't do that, so I've got to do this.
This here ranch will never know
And that's a rush guy.
All that water. Dang it, the horses.
And then we can hit that guy.
There you are, my little trespasser.
And then the turn. I guess that's everything that we need to talk about. So let's just go through the video game news. I don't want the stream to go particularly long.
Is it edible? Only one way to find out.
Done for.
So here we have a game on Steam called Resume Player 21, which looks like a VR soccer game. It seems like it's mostly practicing kicks and not the running part of soccer, and not the blocking if you're the goalie part of soccer. It's free to play, but then it has like color combos, which is $12.74. So, and maybe some extra in-app purchases. And then third-party agreement, English full audio. This doesn't look terrible, frankly. There is a slight danger as to how you might swing a foot out and kick something. There's also a question as far as how is it censoring that you are kicking? How is it sensing that you're kicking everything? Do you plug it seems like there's an Adidas tie-in. Yeah, how does this thing censor that you're kicking anything? It does seem like you are strapping the controls to your foot. Well, I'm going to put this on the follow list because that does look interesting enough. Alright, well I am doomed.
The roots run deep and adorn them with flowers. The path ahead is overgrown.
I won't let you get away.
Your ignorance is clear.
I accidentally closed my window and had to use the extension Fresh Start, which makes backup snapshots of all the
Nice
tabs open. I must have rolled over on my mouse at some point and actually hit the button. Oh, I suppose I should mention that I probably sound maybe a little bit different. Maybe the audio levels are a little off. Let me know in the chat if you find the audio levels wrong. Before I started tweaking, before I started playing The Walking Dead, I tweaked everything, and the first episode of The Walking Dead came out terrible because I had the gain way too high. There's a gain for microphone levels in Windows, in the old Windows device properties, not even the Windows 10 we're going to give you less options properties, that for the Blue Yeti it has the gain set to somewhere around 100 when it really should be about 10. Otherwise you get this annoying hiss, and I was having this annoying hiss. I probably had this annoying hiss for forever, and most times I can just ignore it, but it was definitely
My quarry won't escape
getting
that
on my
easily.
nerves. So I brought it down to 10, and then I adjusted the gain on the back of my Blue Yeti, so both a hardware gain and the software gain needed to be adjusted, and then I just kind of adjusted everything on that, and to get it all balanced, then I needed to go into OBS and put in a negative gain to turn it down by 15 decibels. So it now is running a filter for noise reduction on the microphone and then a negative gain of 15 decibels. Software gains at the very end are ideally the place where you would want to make the largest amount of changes if you need to make changes. Like ideally it would all just work. You'd plug in a Blue Yeti, everything would be set at 100%, and that would be the perfect level, or everything would be ideally set at 50%, and that would be the perfect level for everything. And then you could turn it up if you wanted to make slight adjustments. I've still yet to find a great system where I could pull off anything amazing with the audio and turn myself into something like an NPR broadcast or anything like that. I did find out that ideally the radio standards group got together and they said everything should try to be at negative 24 dB, and it should go only 3 to 6 decibels, only a little bit higher or lower than negative 24 dB. But part of that is an implication that you should normalize your audio, and I don't fully agree with that. Not when you are doing live broadcasting, at least. If you were recording in a studio and doing an audiobook, maybe then you normalize the audio, I guess. But then a lot of that takes extra effort.
It might be dry, but it's home.
Try
For the
that.
town's prosperity.
Well, on to the next project.
Should we evolve?
The hunt has only begun. I'll look after this town for as long as I breathe.
You have no right to tread here.
For the town's prosperity. What do we have here?
There we go. So yeah. Please do let me know if the audio sounds terrible. I'll listen to this. The audio settings are not shared between the Shadowverse collectible card game scene and the solo scene I use when I'm pre-recording footage. I could probably use the same scenes, but it does prevent an occasional error where I might switch scenes with the auto-changing setup I have. If I was recording a game and then I moved my mouse all the way to the right on the second monitor, then it would move over.
You wanna play with me?
Let's see. Let's see. TechRaptor has an article here. Iron Games Design is removing a controversial design essays from games. I don't know what this is. I feel like this is a board game controversy. Let's see. Future games will contain no essays but purely factual footages of what would still appear once reviewed by experts. Let's see. Apparently he made some kind of COVID-19 comments, and that got him effectively canceled. I don't know what game this is, though. They publish educational quote-unquote board games that are historically and scientifically based under that label. So, yeah. Apparently there is some kind of games that come out by Iron Game Designs, but I don't recognize any of them.
I owe those women a debt, you see.
So yeah, that's kind of almost not news at that level. It seems like TechRaptor had a slow news week, which is probably the case, where there's just a decent amount of nothing that happened this week as far as I can tell. Although it is still possible that more could happen. Well, if I do that, that won't work. I need to basically do this, and then I can't play that. So it's either this and then this, or this, and this. So that, and then that,
No right to tread here.
and then that, and then evolve.
I won't let you get away.
Let's just hope this guy doesn't take damage.
Dragon is immortal.
LibRetro on Reddit, r/LibRetro, has gotten 50,000.3 people who have
Even should I
followed their group or joined their group on Reddit. It's somewhat questionable as to where the relevancy of Reddit is nowadays. You can see r/Roms on the other hand has 100,000 subscribers, where the Dolphin emulator specifically doesn't have but 46, and then RetroPie has 120,000. So amongst the related communities, they're doing pretty good, not amazingly.
There you are, my little
Although it does also come down to a interesting thought, particularly in this instance. Even if you were deep into the retro scene, do you want to see a bunch of memes and a bunch of just like
Nice marksmanship.
pointless posts around RetroArch or loosely around RetroArch? Or do you want to just get official messages from RetroArch, which is better suited on something like Twitter or Facebook? At a certain level, I don't know how much of a community Reddit has ever been and how much of a community people really want. I feel like personally I am not much of a community follower. If I want memes, and I could go to r/memes, and that would be fine, and I could even see myself maybe taking part on that, because there is the occasional time I might make something I think is funny as a meme, but probably is over the head of most people because it's unrelatable and too specific to me personally. But the only time I ever use Reddit is just
My
to
quarry won't
think
escape
that
easy.
might be where a good sampling of random people are. But I kind of don't think that we really are even at that point speaking truth anymore, because Reddit is its own subsection of people, and if I wanted a better sampling, I probably should go to something like what is that community forum, Reset Era, and I don't want to follow Reset Era. And I think the gaming community in general has always been at least 50% fiction anyways, because real gamers play video games. They don't go on Reddit forums and post comments. So yeah, I've, as a business, had zero success with Reddit. As a consumer, I've had minimal success with Reddit to just kind of keep myself busy, but I've used it very much like a newspaper and not like a chat forum. And I think Reddit in particular has made it such a popularity contest in posts that their upvoting system slowly but surely destroyed any possibility of real conversation. And maybe there is a nice middle ground between something like 4chan, or one of the chans where everything is anonymous and there are no upvotes, and Reddit where everything is associated to a username that might be a throwaway account that's anonymous anyways, but it still has to get a certain number of people to upvote it before your posts don't get buried or hidden or just withheld for review forever. I don't know if this one's gonna disconnect or play. Here we have a game on Steam called the Alpha 101, which is tagged as a sandbox game. This, looking at the video, it seems like it's a little bit all over the place. It's a little too dark. I can't hate the idea of a heads-up display near the main character, but this is probably not a smart idea. It probably would be better if these were up in the corners instead. You're playing as this like asset flip robot that seems to be just hacking and slashing kind of at nothing. I can't actually see any enemies here. This is $4.49 English and Russian, and yeah, it just looks like an asset flip game. Let's see. Well, one free victory. I can't be upset about that. And this is a much nicer chest than this. This is animated terribly. Next, we have a game on Steam called Frame of Mind. Which, see, you're placed in a world where logic is escaping you. Each area of the game defiles reason, requiring you to think outside the box. So this feels like a perception-based puzzle game set more in a modern world instead of a abstract or simplified world. It's free to play. Is it a student project?
My quarry won't escape.
Yes, it is. Okay. New Zealand. Didn't know there was a design school in New Zealand. Media design school in New Zealand. Apparently it's just the name of it, although that may translate. I don't know what language New Zealand's people speak natively. Maybe they speak English. But yeah, I love to highlight student projects, and certainly this is the kind of game that benefits from being a student project way more than trying to be a full game that they then have to sell. Next, we have a game called The Spaces Between. Since this is a visual novel, I think that reminds me to mention just how much of the Telltale games are visual novels, but worse. At a certain level, they should have made the first Walking Dead season, and then they should have gone the visual novel route and said, okay, we're going to just have stationary, extremely limited, flat 2D animations come out with original stories and minimal voice acting or no voice acting. They needed to dip a toe to have a B tier game instead of always trying to make AAA tier games still in a visual novel format that really makes no sense that you would ever succeed in that way. That was just never going to happen. But yeah, with every new Telltale game, they had to license something to justify it, and the licenses were killing them. They weren't investing in their engine, and the engine was killing them instead of using Unity. It's bad managerial decisions throughout the development of their series of games, whereas a small visual novel isn't going to wouldn't have saved their companies, but it would have established Telltale as something other than, oh, we're stealing all of our, we're licensing all of our ideas from other people because we don't have any unique ideas. When you look at something like Double Fine, while plenty of people aren't really happy with the Broken Age point-and-click adventure from Double Fine, me included. I didn't think that was a particularly good point-and-click adventure game. It still was decent, and it still definitely felt like a point-and-click adventure, whereas Telltale games became their own unique thing, and you would think that that unique concept would have been copied or stolen if it was a good concept, and nobody copied or stole it at all. And Telltale definitely didn't push visual novel makers to improve their quality, and they kind of failed in the writing department more than anything. So having a visual novel that's not particularly well written is a kiss of death, and that certainly is a problem too, is that they would hire different writers for each episode inside their episodic Walking Dead games, and most of their games I think they had a different writer for every episode, which had the characters act completely different and go in completely different directions, whereas had they just brought on board one good writer, that would have been a much better job, or one good writing team to write all the games. That would have been fine. Particularly also if you had one good writing team, you could say, hey, give me some of your ideas and we'll animate them and we'll make a standalone experience around that, a smaller experience. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of writers out there that have small short stories that they could have turned into a 4 or 5 hour walking Telltale style like a Walking Dead style Telltale game,
I'll look after this town for as long as I breathe.
or something close to that. Let's do that.
No right to tread here.
For the town's prosperity.
Imbecile.
Okay, we gotta play this.
The path ahead is overgrown.
And then in the turn. As for this game, the space between, it doesn't seem like it's really much of a visual novel. Actually, they're kind of, it seems like it's not really even much of a visual novel, more than it's just a couple lying on the grass looking at constellations, and you're potentially just drawing the constellations.
My throat's bone dry.
Yeah, this feels like a low effort game trying to hide as a visual novel. It's free to play. English full audio. Chinese American college student, but English only. This is the kind of game where if this was a student project, I don't think I would bother to cover it because it seems too simplistic. Also, the idea that here that you have a character that's like Asian American is fine, but you notice in this description, it seems like the entire story centers around that, to the point where I'm a little bit suspicious that this isn't a Chinese game that's just not being released with the Chinese language support to promote Chinese culture, which I would not put it past the Chinese government to do that, to work really, really hard to try and further promote the Chinese culture and canonize it as the best culture and the right culture for everyone.
I won't let you get away.
Hit that.
Stay safe, my sovereign.
And do that. Let's keep on moving. Checker Up has an article. Sorcerer and Nintendo Switch release date is set for February 2021. This looks like a side-scrolling, like Game Boy level pixel graphics, Game Boy Color level pixel graphics dungeon crawler game of some sort. It'll be a complete port of the mobile release. This definitely feels like a old school game, and yeah, I just don't have enough reverence for an old school game to think that this is something I'd want to play. And this trailer is terrible because they're just walking from the left to the right and not doing anything. So, yeah, we may very well find that this is just a slow business, slow news day. And hit that.
No right to tread here.
And then, what do we want to hit here? That. And then
I
that.
owe those women a debt, you see.
And then what do we want to do? Evolve this.
This is the end.
Break the law? Straight shooter, eh?
A fitting end.
Let's see. TechCraft has an article here. Apex Legends Nintendo Switch release date reportedly set for February. Which, okay. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a massive amount of Apex, of Switch announcements, not Apex Legends announcements. We may have a decent amount of that over the year too, but I wouldn't be surprised if we get a lot of Switch announcements this year and not much of anything else. We got a card pack that time for 1 victory compared to the 30 gold we were getting before then. So that's a slight improvement. Apparently I made it to C2 and I've never made it to C2s before. So there's a level of success that I'm slowly getting. The creators of Binding of Isaac have another tabletop game, that side project they made, called Tapeworm. They had already made the Binding of Isaac 4 Souls card game, and if you order this you get a limited bonus of 4 Souls cards, limited edition 4 Souls holo cards.
Time for me to prove myself.
Which you can definitely see Nicholas is still got their own art style and their own little genre of being gross and slightly offensive, which heck, like Spawn has been doing that for decades, and I think we have enough room for at least one company to do that. I still think though that if any company was smart, like Telltale would have been a great company to try a project like this, but almost any small company, if they were smart, should say, hey, let's license the game, The Binding of Isaac, and let's just mod out all the religious and the offensive stuff and make something that's really kid friendly. We'll pay a hefty license fee to Nicholas, which probably would make him happy enough, or them happy enough, and then we could sell it under a different brand and a different publisher.
The uncharted desert awaits.
Yeah, I think that would work for most people. Let's see. I can destroy, or I can just not play. So I'll just not play this turn. Let's see. TechRaptor has an article here. 2020 game lets you play through the chaos of the last year. This feels like this is probably more a joke game than a real game that I'd recommend. You can see the coronavirus and toilet paper collecting and floods and stock market crashes. And some of these I don't even know if these are I don't even know if these are really interesting concepts. I don't think they are for a second. Yeah, we definitely get too much low effort stuff.
All I need's an opening and you're toast.
Alright. Can't evolve for 0 points.
Stay away.
That is definitely something I don't feel like they should bother to have even written an article about. Tyler McVickerson put out a video. I haven't watched it yet, so it might be clickbait, but apparently he's saying he's done with Valve News Network, which, yeah, at a certain level I could understand that. It's not like Valve is making a bunch of news. He may be handing it over to someone else. Or he may just be letting it die on the vine. Arguably, Valve News Network as a concept didn't expand to his Nintendo News Network for me because I didn't even care about that, and frankly, he was just doing a lot of speculation videos and a lot of the hype videos that the second you knew Tyler McVickerson as a YouTube content creator was not passionate about that, then that would have been a dead channel. Unlike other YouTube channels that are capable of pivoting. It is a very good argument about not naming your product or your YouTube channel or whatever after a single thing. Yeah, and I suppose I lucked out in just calling my channel my gamer tag, so in theory, if I did want to pivot extremely far and not even talk about video games, that there's nothing directly in my name that would require that or feel like that. But certainly a lot of people pick gamer tags and names pretty badly, and don't have that long forward-looking perspective that it might be something.
Hey, this wasteland's a fixer-upper.
But yeah, I'll report back. This is probably going to be a fairly busy week. Either I'm going to focus heavily on trying to finish The Walking Dead, which I kind of want to do, and or I'm going to end up watching a lot of the Giant Bomb Game of the Year content, which I'll probably do a lot of that. And on top of that, I'll probably find some other distractions. Here we have that on Steam, a game called Everspace 2. I feel like I should consider Everspace, even though it is a space flying around game, because we can see it's very positive. I'm going to put it on the following list, and then I want to see Everspace 1. Yeah, we can see this actually did make it to the wish list. I've probably been fairly hesitant to want to buy a space game, even one that is mostly positive with 7,000 reviews. But this doesn't look terrible as far as the level of quality I would kind of expect and hope to see. Oh yeah, and I still haven't figured out. I just never log into my router, so I never go and try and tweak the settings the way they probably need to be tweaked to get the images to load faster and not give up so often. See, next we have a game on Steam here called Trika, which this feels like you're in either a Saudi Arabian, Middle Eastern country area, maybe in the past, or you're in maybe more Asian, Indian type country. Although you could just be in a unique world. There's different symbols that you're using to move things around. First-person puzzle game. Does this require VR? No. Well, this is weird because it's a free game. It's English, Japanese, and Chinese. It doesn't say it's a student project. I guess I'll just put this on the follow list. It's weird, though, to have a free game. Like, that constantly makes it a weird argument. Really, I would just say play Trikaya, Trikaya, now, since it's free, since there's no in-app purchases, since it seems like it's probably not going to be a huge time commitment. You don't have to really review a game like that, because there's no reason to do that. It's not very useful consumer advice if something's free. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Puzzle Box Palace, which it may be a little bit lacking in the visuals. Doesn't look like a AAA game, but it does seem like this is a combination of puzzles in a interesting environment, kind of like Myst, if Myst was perhaps a little less consistent in its visuals. Weirdly, this game is free also. This time, though, it is a student project, English and Chinese. Now, arguably, why is this SMU Guildhall game? Why does it support Chinese in particular? I don't know. Because I would think SMU is not a Chinese college, but maybe it is. Or maybe they just had a Chinese student who could translate it fairly easily, so maybe that's the reason. At a certain point, if you do have someone who's a non-English speaker and they're in a programming video game college, they could obviously get extra points that other students can't get for doing a simplistic translation, to the point where the teacher might not even be able to check whether the translation is even accurate and still give extra points for something like that. And I think inherently I'm all for that. If you're bilingual, you get that advantage, and it is just a thing that all people should recognize, is that you should try to be able to communicate as much as possible in as many languages as possible. If you can learn other languages, learning other programming languages is quite like learning spoken languages, but there's a big difference in who you can communicate with and what you're communicating with spoken language versus programming languages. So ideally, you would like to have a programmer who could be bilingual and program a whole bunch of languages. I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't too many people out like that. I personally never succeeded at learning much of other languages, but I do know a decent phrases here and there of most things, and have a bit of a subconscious ability to figure out what is being said, even if I could not in any way speak a full sentence in the language. A lot of that certainly comes down to exposure too. Who you are around when you're a kid is often very helpful as far as what you can and what you won't be able to learn.
Won't let you get away.
Happy I was born this way.
And that makes a good argument to have a diversity of peers and friends too. Diversity of opinion, diversity of language, diversity of status, and yeah, diversity as much as possible. Moving on, because that's not really video game conversation at that point. Denuvo anti-cheat system is getting Steamworks integration, which, okay. So you can now just directly put Denuvo into Valve digital distribution platforms. Yeah. Denuvo has been extremely successful in convincing high-level managers and CEOs that Denuvo should be in their games. And they must have some numbers that they show to guarantee some level of lack of lost sales or something. Otherwise, it would basically make no sense that Denuvo exists at all. And we constantly see a case where Denuvo gets cracked within a week or two. There's been a few instances where Denuvo hasn't been cracked for maybe a month or two. But I really just don't think that stops many people at all. As someone who waits until games go on sale years later, more often than not, Denuvo is often eliminated from the game at that point, and Denuvo would certainly be a much bigger problem for people if it was never removed from games and it was consistently proven that it actually was the cause of slowdowns, which speculation has always been that that's the case, but proof is hard to come by. Right. Let's do this. And then let's evolve this, I guess.
This is the end.
We may see a decent number of increased usage of Denuvo, but I think probably nowhere as much as you might think because of the license fees. And it's hard to imagine a scenario where Denuvo would just go bankrupt and go away and there wouldn't be something even worse that just replaced it. So it's the world we live in. Arguably, if you're on Steam, you probably don't need Denuvo in the first place. But apparently some people think they do. I think Valve is pretty good about stopping people from having cracked versions of their games that then connect to Steam and that not getting detected. Moving on, I'm gonna fall asleep here if I don't move faster. Gamatsu has an article. Nacon is gonna publish the game Session, which is, I believe, a skateboarding game. Which, normally when a game gets announced, they already have a publisher. Seems kind of late to the party. Let's see. Here we have a game called Invincible Fins. This doesn't look like anything. It looks like MS Paint level graphics, a kind of kid game. $12.99, which is way too expensive. Bunch of languages, third-party EULA. Let's burn through those types of games quickly. Here we have a game on Steam called Infinitrap, as infinity, which just looks like a dungeon crawler to me from the screenshots, and looks a little dark. And all the trailers showing us is just kind of ridiculous intro animations. So it kind of feels like it's a infinite runner from the actual gameplay they're showing here. You know, Ohio Jack instead of Indiana Jones. Yep, it looks like it's mostly just an infinite runner. $8.39 English full audio, allegedly. That's not really enough there. So I'm going to skip that. Gamatsu has an article, Squirrel Surveillance Mystery Game, NUTS, or NUTS, I guess is what it's called, launches January 22nd for Apple Arcade and February 4th for Switch and PC. There's a Linux program called the Network UPS tool that I have set up, but then I kind of can't go any further with it. I probably could put a little bit more polish to the settings, but at the moment it would just shut down everything because I have too weak of a UPS plugged into it, and it thinks the battery is always too low. And I've yet to see if there's maybe a setting I can set to say actually only shut down when it's at 1% of battery, because that specific part seems a little scripted. The reason why you'd use that instead of something easier to install and set up, because that was a hassle to say the least to set up using Docker, is because it can then communicate with other computers that would also be plugged into the UPS and where the UPS probably won't be able to communicate with multiple computers until its battery stats and all of that, unless you buy a very expensive UPS, which at a certain point maybe that is a good argument. There is also a decent argument to pulling the trigger and buying a decent sized uninterruptible power source and putting like more car batteries in it in parallel and giving it just way more power than you normally would have. But you'd have to be fairly trusting of your experimental skills there, because there are definite limitations on a UPS as far as how much current can be connected and how much voltage can be connected. And if you had batteries in parallel, you're going to increase the current, and if you add them in series, you're going to add the voltage. I don't know if there's much of a way to get around that. Even that there might be some trick to adding more without affecting anything, but I don't know. At a certain point, you almost certainly would need some kind of special electronics that switch between banks of batteries. And I don't even know what you'd call a device like that. Some kind of rollover switch of some sort. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called The Happy Little Virus, which looks just like a kind of neon top-down twin-stick shooter game. $8.49 English only. Nothing interesting there to me. Arguably, my interest in games in general maybe is a little lower these days than it at one point may have been.
All I need is an opening and you're toast.
And go ahead and do that.
What do we have here?
Do that. TechRaptor has an article here. The Thing-inspired survival horror game Buried in Ice has been announced. This is interesting that we're getting game announcements at this point, because it's questionable. It's real questionable how many games are coming out in 2021. Some of this looks a lot like The Thing, and setting a game in the environment of the Thing remake movie, which is what I imagine they're referencing, is an interesting thought. because then you don't have to animate that much. But even at that, this does feel like this is more asset flipped than original animation.
Get your message loud and clear.
And at a certain level, if you're going to make a game like The Thing, based on the Thing movie, you're going to run into these similar problems where people just the same problems that people would have run into when they made the Predator games and the Aliens games, in that those are movies with nearly invincible characters that you don't really want to see die, where video games need multiple enemies almost certainly, or you're going to have to work really hard to justify multiple encounters with the same enemy. And the Thing remake was definitely more of a suspense mystery game, not an action event that you would typically expect in a video game. So if you're going to try and make something like The Thing, you have to randomize who the Thing is. You have to have a sequence of events that are fairly scripted, but ideally you would also like to move those sequence events around, or sometimes have some things happen, sometimes have some things not happen. As bad as the nonary game Virtue's Last Reward really was, it at the very least did have a decent handle on that idea, because every single story path in that visual novel did typically end with you realizing that one or more of the people you were dealing with was the bad guy. And so then maybe you go into the idea of alternate timelines with a game like The Thing, or randomized events with but yeah, I don't have a lot of faith with the things I have seen there. I feel like at best you're going to end up making a game like The Council, which nobody really remembers The Council at all, and I'm not even sure The Council finished its storyline, or if it kind of left it on a cliffhanger for maybe a second season. Moving on, TechRaptor has a opinion piece here. Ubisoft repeats its mistakes with Scott Pilgrim. You have to log in to Ubisoft apparently. Yeah, this doesn't look terrible. I don't know specifically why I would want to play a Scott Pilgrim beat 'em up with cutesy animation now when I could play River City Girls or any other River City Ransom style game. I really don't think there's going to be this new fandom with Scott Pilgrim. The way this tweet was put out too, it made it seem like Ubisoft themselves came out and said they had no idea why people wanted this released, but yeah, let's see. Fans wanted a way to preserve the title, a way to ensure they could be played forever and not just it be a digitally memory. Yeah, see, it was originally delisted back in 2014, and then 6 years later, limited run games, and Ubisoft Digital released a new version of it, and yeah, it definitely feels like the only reason they re-released anything is because the copyright, they wanted to maintain the copyright on it.
What an oath! This has gotten quite out of hand.
Let's go and evolve.
You're done for.
I'm ready for more. What do we have here?
Stop! Yeah! Stop!
At the end of the day, though, yeah, I might play it, but also I probably want to be slightly careful about playing Ubisoft games. I want to reward Ubisoft for a lot of their bad behavior as far as how they treat consumers and the level of their quality. I already am kind of pot committed with a lot of Assassin's Creed games and other Ubisoft products. Like, I own quite a bit of it. And they still are forcing a lot of people to use Uplay one way or another. So they didn't really learn that lesson.
What an oath!
I envy you.
Let's see.
I won!
How many more victories do we need to get with the Forcecraft? Imagine it's like 2. Yep. Forcecraft, 2 more victories. Well, 1 more Forcecraft, and then we would be left with just getting a Swordcraft victory. So that's not a terrible way to go about it. I think we already talked about this article. Epic Games Store exclusivity is muddling the Hitman 3 Legacies DLC promise. They've come out and put out a post that I think explains how they're going to maintain that promise, but it is going to be, I think, less than easy or less than automatic. Let's see. Gamma Sutra has an analyst article here that the Nintendo Switch outsold every other console in 2020. Which, okay, that's believable. Like, who could you make an argument would have outsold them? Like, the fact is, the Switch was out for all 12 months of 2020, where Xbox Series X and Series S and PlayStation 5 or not. So even if they would have had to have amazing launches, which they didn't really, and they would have had to have had no shortages, which they didn't, for that to even possibly not be the case. And I imagine they don't count numbers for PCs, because it's a little unfair to count every single PC, laptop, Chromebook out there as a gaming console. And it's also pretty impossible to run stats to say, well, did you buy this as a gaming tier PC to play games? Or did you, particularly when you have a decent amount of people that are also building from components. So you would have to ask a lot of questions, which they just can't ask, really. You could run some numbers as far as just how many pre-built gaming PCs are sold, but there's no guarantee that even those are being actually used for gaming. And you could potentially run software sales or new customers on something like Steam, and that might work a little bit, but I don't think greatly.
All I need's an opening and you're toast.
Okay, well, let's hit that there.
No, corpses.
Then hit that. And then hit that. TechRaptor has an article. Escape from Tarkov. Q&A reveals the amount of banned cheaters. Apparently they've banned, I believe the number was 30,000 cheaters in the first 15 days of 2021. So, yeah. I hear about Escape from Tarkov, but I don't think it has a single player experience, or it just hasn't caught my eye. Visually, this looks fine as a first-person shooter. It's questionable whether you have multiple guns, and I don't know if this is mostly just a survival game where zombies show up every now and then, or never show up at all. Could very well just be a player versus player game. 2 damage restore. This. And then this.
Let's play.
And then this.
You're done for.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Hot Dot Tiles, which is just a 2048 clone of no interest. No reason that's early access at all. $1.79, which is also still too expensive. 100 achievements, so you know it's an achievement game, and English only. So it's got multiple strikes against it as far as, is this a real product or is this just some ridiculous money laundering or whatever it is that people think they get from selling games like that on Steam, or do get from selling games on Steam.
But the time for games is over. One helping of this and it's 99 for you.
Hit that
Such a lovely couple.
and hit that.
No more corpses.
Gamma Sutra has an article here. Epic has submitted claims against Google and Apple to the UK Competition Appeal Tribunal, which apparently this is the first. This was done in December, but they only just surfaced. So here we have Epic now trying to sue Google and Apple in the United States and in the UK. I imagine they also are trying to sue them in multiple other locations too, and the records are just not that public or that well to search, particularly right now. But yeah, more lawsuits for Epic. We haven't seen Apple or Google come out directly and tell people to not do business with Epic if they want their games on the Android or iOS operating system. But you certainly could imagine there might be some desire to say something like that by those companies, but that would be directly anti-competitive. That would be interference with a contract. So yeah, they're probably smart enough not to say that. But I also would point out that Epic is not succeeding in making friends. Well, you kind of,
I love this job.
if Epic was going to succeed, you would have wanted them to try and be less aggressive about the way they do business. And that this has been probably a decade plus long claim around Epic, is that they are super aggressive in how they do business, and that's just not who you really want to do business with. In the same way that nobody wants to do business with Walmart, but then everybody ends up getting forced to do business with Walmart. So I guess the question is, do you want Epic to become the new Walmart and replace Apple and Google, who are the current Walmarts, in those fields?
It's just the beginning.
Let's hit that one.
I'll live again.
Let's play. This ends here. So sparkly. Yeah.
Let's hit that one. Gamma Sutra has an article here. The mobile developer Savage Game Studios has netted $4.4 million for a competitive shooter. They're gonna make a new studio in Helsinki and Berlin, and push ahead with the production of its debut product. So we may hear something about them in a few whiles. Tech Raptor is looking for freelance features and guides writers. They seem to also be looking for staff writers, which I think they probably probably would want you to be a freelance writer. I could certainly see a lot of people thinking they could do the job of being a freelance writer and then finding out fairly quickly that they just don't produce enough output in the time frame that you would want, that they would want things to be written. Yeah, I could easily imagine it's a fairly difficult job to be a freelance games writer, even as someone who's like even as someone who does something sort of like writing articles. I only do it verbally through Let's Plays, and trying to edit what I do through long plays down into an actual article would be a nightmare scenario for me. It'd be doing the exact things I wouldn't want to do with my life, which is writing and struggling and trying to perfect things, or doing a bad job and not perfecting things, which is also equally embarrassing, which we've seen plenty of misspellings on TechRaptor articles. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Swallow the Blue, which looks like it's some weird pixely graphics, fairly dark in most screenshots here. It's free. He's asking for people to follow his social pages, which at the very least is at least honest, and we now know the motivation of this one person for listing their game for free. He does seem to claim to be a university student. That's not terrible. I'll put this on the follow list, but I probably would reject this as a game because it just doesn't look unique enough. It doesn't look polished enough.
I did it! I won!
There we go. We're at the Battle Pass rank 20. And then that leaves me with the ability now to play as Swordcraft. And honestly, if I can just get through the news, then we could pretty much wrap up the stream early. But I don't think that's going to happen. Let's see, here we have a game called Elven Truth, which is anime girls in low effort jigsaw puzzles. We've seen a game very similar to this. $1.19, English full audio. Nothing there of interest. Here we have a game called Happy Valentine's Day. They are just putting random phrases here. $1.19, English only. This clearly is a Chinese developer. Like, at least some kind of Asian developer, and I would just have to assume Chinese here. It's getting tagged as a dating sim and a clicker and strategy game, and none of those tags are accurate. And this is not what we want to see. As far as games on Steam, we don't want somebody to be able to just abuse the open door policy to the point where we're potentially going to have 2 or 3 games at the exact same time listed on Steam, particularly when it really doesn't deserve to be on Steam in the first place. Here we have a game called Until Sunset, which looks like a stealth game. I don't know if there's enough here to interest me, though. $1.99, English, Portuguese, Brazil. Apparently it has puzzle, stealth, and story. One of the problems with Fear 2 is that it didn't have native controller support, so there definitely were times where it did not play particularly well because the controller just couldn't move the gun cursor fast enough. Also, because of last stream's log out and reboot disaster, I lost all the newest settings with Joy to Key, So I had to remap the buttons again. And that was a bit of a nightmare. Fear 3 does fortunately claim to have partial controller support. I'm gonna skip Until Sunset as a game. It's just not interesting enough. Here we have a game that's all Asian characters. It's a Sudoku game. There's really no reason why this wouldn't support English, but it doesn't. $2.99 Chinese only. I don't know how popular Sudoku is in China. I imagine it's probably fairly popular. Here we have a game called Reach the Summit, which is just a hardcore platformer with bad graphics. 59 cents, English, full audio. Yeah. That's a no. Apparently, today is supposed to be the most depressing day of the year because it's the coldest and darkest day of the year. So, yeah, I guess that might be an interesting thought. Next, we have a game on Steam called The Dragon Sword. I'm fairly depressed with this quality of listings. So this looks like a Chinese game with you've got some cleavage showing Chinese women, and then you've got a ton of Chinese men. This looks like this is just an RPG Maker game. $17.99 Chinese only. Yep, it doesn't look great.
Let the stakeout begin.
Do that.
Oh, so it's a fight you want.
Fool awakens to four sufferings.
Here we have a game on Steam called Fawn Air, which looks like an NES level graphic collection of games.
Those centuries pass.
English not supported, $9.99, Japanese only. Nothing there of interest. Here we have a game called Idiot, which is probably on the nose. Seems to be a collection of asset flipped elements. Let's see. Maybe there's a puzzle game here, but it also feels like it's Russian. Early access, $4.49, Russian only. Claims to have English subtitles. Yeah. Best case scenario, I put this on the fall list. Worst case scenario, I skip it, and for what I'm seeing, I think I can skip it. And today's fairly easy decision today. Let's see.
I shall give birth to a new world.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Gloom and Doom, which looks like it's a Western visual novel. Okay, we got a different art style here, although we have a bit of a problem because this character does not really match with this character, which would almost make sense if human characters look one way and monster characters look the other way, but then this succubus demon character, notice the horns here, doesn't really line up with this character or the human character, and this psycho clown Joker like character doesn't really line up either. Yeah, all the images seem to be fairly inconsistent. Yep. There is possibly an argument that there's too many young aspiring artists out there that have this almost like graffiti or just bad comic book art style, and I don't know how you polish this art style and maintain something that somewhat looks like this while making it look better to my eye. It may very well just be a taste thing, and that may not really there may be some people out there that really do like this art style, but I don't know if I believe that. This is just a visual novel for $17.99 with 28 achievements. 90s outcast movies. What it's inspired by, apparently.
Fight together, everyone, for our future.
Subtract 3 from this guy, I guess.
You are done for. I will support the vanguard. Carry on.
Well, I screwed up there badly. Yeah. It kind of feels like when you look at characters like this, that this is somebody's original characters that they drew in high school and they fell in love with it. And that's fine, but I kind of feel like the art often needs to be massively improved and practiced. And there is an argument to be made that I think maybe Japanese kids who grow up seeing anime all the time are always drawing and always practicing, where Western kids, American kids, have more in their life, and they're not allowed to be so obsessive. They have different things they can do. They're not pushed as hard as Japanese kids are, and that's a good thing in the overall. But it does often create a scenario where the art just does not look as good.
Stay safe, my sovereign.
It won't be long now. I've got 8 transformations up there.
There was a Amazon Prime movie that was animated not too different from this, and the animation style definitely stood out. On the other hand, in all fairness, like the Noner games and their art styles, particularly in their cover image, is pretty distinct, and that worked. And it's not like we've seen a lot of art styles like this, so there is room for one well done visual novel with this art style to potentially succeed. We've just so far have yet to see it. And yeah, I just don't think that Gloom and Doom is going to be the one that does do that. You would think that a lot of the mangas that made by Westerners that came out, like Lock and Key, would have come out with great art styles, but then you look at like The Walking Dead and you look at the standard art styles for most Marvel and DC comics, and it's all fairly unappealing. Let's see. Moving on, we have a Gematsu article. The laid-back camp virtual Lake Montosu launches in March, and the Fumotu campsite in April. Second trailer. I think these are mostly cell phone games, even though they're coming to PS4 and PC and Switch also, where you're kind of just hanging out with anime girls while camping. So probably slightly inspired by the anime where the girls were camping and working their way to the South Pole. This is slightly different than the standard virtual girls games we've seen, where it's just a virtual girl hanging out in either your bedroom or their bedroom. But it's probably not changing too much there. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Dragon Call, which, with all the text on it, looks like it's probably a mobile Chinese game that's been ported. It's $5.99 English, Chinese, yeah. And if I can get the images to load, we can look a little bit more. It looks like it's a collectible card game. Banish somebody with 1 defense.
Too slow.
I don't see a real reason to banish somebody with 1
Though
defense.
centuries pass, I remember all.
Yeah. Here we have Doraemon being animated here, so I don't know if this art is being stolen on the video. Doraemon being a very recognizable Japanese anime, mostly for kids, I think. Which doesn't make a lot of sense when you have bikini armored characters also combined with that. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have any confidence in this being a top tier game.
I remember all.
So I'm gonna skip it.
Allow yourself to forget. I've been spotted.
Next we have a game called Flak, which seems to be a bombing game where you like bomb buildings and you, I guess, maybe are placing the planes where they start. So yeah, I don't think there's much of a game there. It's free, English only. Yeah, even at that, it's not really that interesting to me. We could play the Royal Banner now, or we could do this now.
Allow yourself to forget.
Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Whisperwind, which doesn't look like it's
And ever more.
a high resolution game. It definitely has a blurriness to it, and it just kind of feels like it's trying to be like Alone in the Dark, the original Alone in the Dark, maybe a little bit more polished than that. $4.49 English full audio. I don't think I could tolerate this low polygon imagery, so that's gonna be a no for me.
This will be over in the blink.
At the end of the tunnel, there is only darkness.
There we go. So here we have IOI giving out their pre-launch guide, which will explain how you get the DLC correctly. Or it seems to explain a lot of things about pre-launching. But also at a certain level, this is also just them telling you to like set up an IOI account and pre-order and preload and buy the game that maybe you're not ready to decide whether you want to buy that game or not. Right, well.
Is it edible? Only one way to find out.
And then this
Brother. At your service.
says, once each turn when a follower's attack or defense is increased by an effect, deal 3 damage to an enemy follower. Well, why did that not trigger?
You are done for.
Go on, eat up.
Because it was just affected. The main thing I guess to take from this is we can guarantee players will not need to repurchase the games. On PC, we're continuing to work on a solution with our partners to allow PC players who own Hitman 1 or 2 to import locations from those games into Hitman 3, no additional cost. So they're still working on it, which it seems fairly odd to put out a post to say we're just working on it still.
My stomach.
You'd think that they would have more. Oh, geez, I may have already covered a lot of this news. These may just be old tabs. I'm gonna start closing a bunch of these tabs because I know we talked about them. Wow, we may be closer to the end than I thought. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for little favors. Right,
No one gets past
that
me. So, you withstood it
in
all.
the turn. Here we have a game called Object In, which we may have talked about this before. Looks like a horror asset flip game. Free. When did this come out? December 25th? I think what I did is I may have opened up a bunch of old tabs in specific because I was uncertain about whether I talked about the games or not.
Hands up! You're not too bad yourself.
Desperately trying to win here, but I'm running out of options. Here we have a game on Steam called Ravenwailed, which seems to be a strategy placement game that's a mobile port. We talked about this. This is $4.49. Yep. How many of these tabs did we already talk about? Yeah, that one. That one.
Yum yums to fill my tum-tums!
That one.
You crusty horseshoe.
Talked about that. Talked about that. Oh man, yeah, this is gonna go nicely. I think we talked about this. Strike Team Gladius. Yeah, we talked about this. Bug fighting game, early access, $17.49. Alright, hit that. 3 damage to something.
You're gonna feel the impact, brother.
I know when I've lost.
And then
Ninja art. Sheep counting. Don't count your tanukis just yet.
do we want to evolve this?
It won't be long now.
The pain train is not enough force.
What's the din-din?
Aegis transformation! Holy jam!
I will save you no matter the cost.
Yeah, this might be a case where the snapshot that I opened just had a bunch of tabs open. So I may have missed new news in between the snapshot and this point. But if that is the case, then whatever. We covered some of it, the new news, at least. Or it might be that there's just plenty of more tabs to talk about after all of these old tabs. Okay. Guess we can do this. And I guess we can do this.
Don't count your tanukis just yet.
And if I attack with this, I'll give my ability, my action to that guy,
Just as planned.
Did I not pray hard enough?
which I don't want to do. I don't want to attack with this yet. We'll attack next turn.
Well done, neighbor.
Yeah, we kind of went from the last... We went from last stream where we had Pokemon Snap being announced to today's stream where basically nothing is being announced. I did watch the G4 video with Adam Sessler and the Completionist. It kind of just talking about games that are coming out, it wasn't particularly well polished, and I don't feel like Adam Sessler is particularly at the top of his game these days. So yeah, it wasn't a great experience. Alright, well.
I honor
Let's
thy
speed
form.
things up.
Do this. Alright, so
Too slow.
3,
Too slow.
6, plus 9 does 4 damage when I end the turn, which means I win. And I am still just totally closing old tabs. I don't think we left any ton of tabs open to cover
The pleasure was
on
all
Monday.
mine.
Monday was a bad stream too. We've had 2 difficult streams in a row here, where Monday was my probably my fault with the internet, and today was definitely not my fault. So, well, this now puts us in an interesting position. I'm actually in a fairly interesting position because there's basically nothing I can do here. I could do a quest for no reason, other than just pride of getting missions done. I could do practice for no reason. I could do the main story for no reason. There's no new main story. Which then that just puts you either to make private games in Pass just to play with people, or just play competitive to get up and ranked. I could do another arena, but I definitely don't want to commit to that. So let's just come over here, grab Force Craft because we think that wins sometimes, and play one more game as I'm still trying to close every single tab that I've already dealt with. It's fairly easy to tell whether you've dealt with these tabs also, because half of them are already on the following list, or they are so blatantly obvious that they wouldn't be on the following list. Let's see. But this is gonna have me be fairly quiet as I try to burn through all this fairly quickly. Is it my turn? Yes, it is, so I should play. Not sure if we've covered this game. This game is called Curse of the Dead Gods. It's launching February 23rd for the Xbox One, PS4, Switch, and PC. It looks like a fairly high-paced Diablo kind of bullet hell game. Looks slightly interesting. Probably have already talked about that, because these tabs on both sides of that tab are still... I guess I should applaud TechRaptor. They finally stopped reposting the same Game of the Year 5 articles that they had over and over again. But yeah, I think that's not much praise that's actually deserved for just stopping... stop being annoying. This one's just playing all kinds of amulets. I'm not sure we've covered this game. Here we have a game called I Am Robot. That's 539, English, German, and Russian. Seems like you're a robot, you're running around and you're hacking, slashing things. There might be a game here. I suspect not. But there is some visual polish. And we actually are seeing some enemies. But it also is also on my following list, so there I know that that was one already. Do this. Would have been smarter to evolve one of these and attack. Nah, let's do this.
You're done for. Let's play. Yeah.
Here we go. I'm probably being way too careful here.
Divinity by name's ignorance.
I could have potentially just closed a lot of tabs in a row. I'm seeing the beginning of the end, so if there are any more tabs to talk about, they must have been all at the beginning.
Every shot is a miracle.
Oh, come on!
My blade is your salvation. A painless death is the mercy I can afford you.
Well, yeah, we may just end up wrapping up here.
Purge is all sin.
Although, there's probably enough time to play one more game. Unless this one goes fairly long. Just on the level of ensuring there's
Let's play. Let's play.
there's enough going on. Yeah, I'm gonna lose. Best case scenario, I should have done 2 damage to this, then evolved, and then attacked.
It won't be long now.
But
So sparkly.
This river of sorrow will flood.
keep on closing tabs. I will still need to want to check the Humble Bundle store, and I will want to check my Twitter feed. So there's a few things left to do, a couple things.
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
It is also very possible that just not that many games came out on the weekend anyway, so I wouldn't be surprised if I actually did cover 99% of all games that came out this weekend. And it is a holiday, Martin Luther King Day in the United States, and we're in the middle of a tumultuous, to say the least, swearing in of a new president, so people may not have really released that many games. since we know Ben is leaving Giant Bomb, it did occur to me that it would be interesting if Ben decided to transition and someone who obviously was known as Ben before comes back several months later. At a certain level, I can certainly appreciate that if you're making such a personal and decision that you want to keep private. But that is certainly also unfair that public celebrities who often are forced into being way too public with all their personal information would have to effectively quit a job to hide. There is a YouTuber that seems to legitimately have transitioned, and in the process also pretty much gave up on running his YouTube channel, or now her YouTube channel. Sorry about that. I'm not gonna even name the YouTuber, but it does certainly highlight the difficulty of something like that people must have to put up with or go through. Well, non-celebrities probably don't have to go through it anywhere to the levels as celebrities do, with a whole bunch of random people giving their unsolicited opinions. But I imagine even private people often get a lot of pushback and unsolicited opinions. Here's that game, Project Morpheus. This is just such a shame that it's not English and it's Chinese only, because this definitely feels like they are doing a very nice, polished version of making a Resident Evil ripoff. And I look forward to the day we start to see more Chinese games that do particularly well in China, getting English translations and ports, and hopefully that will happen faster than what we've had in the past with Japanese games, which often are delayed by significant numbers of years. Okay, well that brings me to the Humble Bundle. So let me see if there's any Humble Bundles after closing what was like 100 tabs from Friday we'd already covered. We have Programming Fundamentals Book Bundle. Let's take a look at that. From Mercury. So inherently, I think the problem here with a book bundle like this is going to be fairly obvious. You don't want to be ADD about learning programming. You want to learn one for probably at least a year and then become an expert on that. So mathematics for computer games and game programming is kind of a side story. I could see getting that. But then you'd pretty much want to focus only on C programming. And arguably, C programming is the wrong programming language. You want to do C++ or C#, not basic C, because basic C is actually missing several features, and there's no reason why you would use basic C at all. Like you would either jump from C++ down to assembler or use a completely different language. Then you really get it confused using Java. I don't think there's a good argument to learn to program Java at all now, considering how Java is just not supported. Some of these side books also are more late in the game. Like, you cannot do a C or C++ programming book and do mathematics at the same time. You should do C++ first and then get into the mathematics of of graphics and game programming when you know the basics. Python, arguably, if you are going to learn Python and C or C++, you should do Python earlier. I feel like Python is a good middle school and even elementary school language to teach all kids, whereas C, C++, C# is for people that want to be programmers. Cloud computing is way too specialized. Network security and cryptography is way too specialized. Data structures and programming using Java, once again, not that important. So half of these books are not that useful. Software testing, then Python 3 compared to regular Python. Well, you probably should learn Python 3 if you're going to learn Python. And cyber security doesn't make sense. TensorFlow, high-level AI type programming, you don't really need to know that particularly early on. These books are kind of all over the place as far as the order at which you'd read them and what you would read. Bash command line and shell scripts are hidden behind the $15 or more, where this would be very useful for anybody using Linux even if they weren't programming, whereas MS Excel 2019 programming is probably fairly useless unless you specifically have to work in Excel and have to make a program in Excel. I definitely remember that when I was a kid, I bought a very thick, very big book that was around video game programming, and I never got around to reading any of it, and frankly, I don't think any of the information in it was particularly accurate or useful, so you have to be extremely careful. Also, I just don't think that's, from a book, the best way to get into game programming or programming in general. You need to go through a class. You need to have someone who actually knows what they're talking about, and they can guide you along and give you lesson plans and move you forward down a path of actual success instead of throwing you into the deep end and just seeing if you sink or swim. There are no game bundles at all, though, so we're still kind of waiting for that. And then that brings me back to my Twitter feed to see if there's any new news, which seemingly there is no new news. One of the things I did is I took out some of the uBlock Origin blocks cosmetic blocks I had, just to make sure that I wasn't missing some level of news. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. You can never be 100% sure. We may hit a point in the next 5 years, though, where there's just a lot of people that stop using Twitter. And I can say it's not super video game related, but the people who were super happy about one group of people being censored off of almost every platform are not happy now that that has pretty much happened, and they want more censorship and more bannings. And so it is that's the way of censorship. That's the way anyone who had any experience with it or had looked to the past and researched history knew that this is where it was going to go. Is that the people pushing for any extreme actions, and let's face it, censorship is an extreme action, are going to just continuously push for extreme actions, and we need people to call for middle grounds. It's once again, I think, worth pointing out that incitement to violence was a decent argument in my book for Donald Trump to be banned from Twitter. But then when they started going after anyone and everyone that was not as liberal as them, then it just quickly dissolved into cancel culture nonsense. And Parler in particular being completely shut down felt like an extremely unfair action, because there is no way you can make the argument that 100% of all the people on Parler were inciting violence. No way you can make that argument. And instead, this is just a case of Twitter and Google and iOS, Apple, mostly Apple and Google, just doing the bidding of SJWs to eliminate a competitor at the same time. And apparently Parler is back up. But also I have no real interest in going and checking out Parler. Because the last thing I want is another social media site that's just going to fail. I'd like to see something that just cannot fail, something decentralized as the next step. And something that maybe is like Twitter for some, and maybe is like Facebook for some, and maybe is a little bit like Discord for some. And it's very customizable. Well, interestingly, according to my timer, we've only been going 2 hours and 10 minutes, but that's good enough for me. So I'm going to call this a stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.